Yeah, so with the increase in arrests here, we've seen grand juries rejecting charges in some of these cases as well. Our digital investigative reporter, Jordan Fisher, he's been in and out of the courtrooms for these last couple of weeks. And Jordan, we know you reported yesterday that the grand juries, they've rejected what, at least 8 of these indictments so far?
Right, 8 so far that we know of.
Yeah.
And just to put that into context, I've been covering the criminal justice system for more than a decade now, and prior to a month ago, I had never covered a grand jury rejection. It's called a no true bill. That's the technical term. Part of the reason is grand juries are basically designed to be black boxes. You're not supposed to know what's going on. Part of that is to protect the privacy of people who don't wind up getting charged, so that those allegations don't come out. But it does leave people asking what exactly is going on here, right? Are the cases just so weak that grand jurors are rejecting them? Is this a political response to the federal surge? I spoke with Professor Abby Smith, who leads Georgetown Law's Criminal Defense and Prisoner Advocacy Clinic. What she told me she thinks is going on is that grand jurors are basically reclaiming the power that the Constitution always intended them to have. Here's what she told me.
The grand jury historically was meant to be a bulwark against overzealous prosecutors, overcharging, corrupt government, runaway government. And what's most heartening about the DC grand juries is they're kind of returning to their historical role in saying, no, this doesn't feel like a crime. This doesn't seem like the sort of thing that ought to be handled by the criminal legal system, which is a very blunt and harsh instrument. And, they're serving their function of tempering or mediating the government's worst instincts.
Yeah, so I imagine this is pretty embarrassing for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Is there any indication that they're going to change their approach here? How are they responding?
Right, well, we haven't seen any differences in the filings so far. I should say that I reached out to U.S. Attorney Pirro's office twice to comment on this story. I didn't get a response from them, but she has spoken out several times over the last month. She sent a statement to us a few weeks ago after a grand jury refused to indict a woman accused of threatening the president. She said that these grand juries have become politicized. In an interview with her former employer, Fox News, she said that D.C. residents have become, and this is her quote, so used to crime that they don't care that the law is being broken. And it's really astounding to see that the city's chief prosecutor, because in D.C. the federal prosecutor is the city's chief prosecutor because of our unique status, right? It's very astounding to see the chief prosecutor attacking citizens, attacking grand juries. I spoke with Professor Thomas Frampton. He's a legal expert at the University of Virginia School of Law. He said it's also an extremely self-defeating thing to do, obviously, because they need these grand jurors. I mean, here's what he said to me.
It's extraordinarily rare. And in the criminal context, it's a little like missing a layup and then screaming at the rim for unfairly denying your shot. It's also particularly odd because the rank and file prosecutors that work for that office presumably have to take future cases to grand juries, and they're going to have to try cases to petit juries that are made up of the same District of Columbia residents that the U.S. Attorney is attacking. So it's a bizarre thing to do. It seems like it's calculated to just deepen the mistrust between district residents and law enforcement. And it's the kind of thing you'd only do if you were appealing to an audience of one, to President Trump, rather than doing what most prosecutors do, which is to say, even when things don't go their way, they respect the decisions of the citizens who are an indispensable part of the criminal justice process.
You know, Jordan, a lot of folks are familiar with the Sandwich Man now, and I keep thinking of that case, and Janine Pirro's office essentially tried to throw the book at this guy, getting him a felony for throwing that sandwich at a police officer, but the grand jury said no.
Right, Sean Dunn charged with an 8-year federal felony, now facing a 1-year misdemeanor. He was in court today. He got arraigned. He'll be going to trial in early November. That's just one of the cases where they've had to downgrade and dismiss charges, some of them that they've decided to leave federal court entirely and go to D.C. Superior Court. And, as a magistrate judge said today, that's kind of the great irony of this federal surge is that the citizens of the city, many of whom do not support this, may feel that they're oppressed, are getting to decide on the righteousness of these charges, are getting to decide whether to uphold these charges or not. What's the concern here, right? The prosecutor's office could decide, as you said, that they don't want to avoid the embarrassment. Now, they haven't said that they felt embarrassed, and in fact, the U.S. Attorney Pirro has stood by these charges, has stood by these charging decisions, but they could decide that they want to avoid that and that they have what they think are legitimate felony cases that they're going to charge as misdemeanors. On the other hand, we could keep seeing these grand jury non-returns.
Yeah, and why does that matter to the average person at home watching this play out? Why does it matter that these grand juries are declining charges here?
What the legal experts told me is that it shows that frayed relationship, that bond of trust between the citizens of the District of Columbia and their chief prosecutor. And again, think about it, as the magistrate judge said today, and as Professor Frampton just said, prosecutors don't just need citizens to return indictments. They need them to be witnesses. They need them to report crimes. They need them to sit on juries and return convictions. Citizens are required for every single part of this process. And if these experts are correct and that relationship has become frayed because of the surge, that really starts to break down a very critical element of society here. That being said, Professor Smith from Georgetown, what she told me is she hopes that other grand juries look at what's happening here in D.C. and that they replicate this, which is to say to take back that power that the founders intended them to have, to be a check, as she put it, on some of the worst instincts of the government. And I guess we'll just, we'll leave with her thought and what she told me.
Yeah.
It takes some courage at either a trial or a grand jury for grand jurors to say, no, we actually have inherent power. And it's a constitutional power as well as a common law power and a historical one to say no. And so, I'm loving it. I'm loving it that citizens know they have that power. What a great thing.
Yeah, you've heard that saying before, that it's easy to get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, but clearly that is not the case here.
Sure. Yeah, Professor Smith said that, the defense listservs are abuzz with a news saying, which is that you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, but maybe not a salami sandwich.
All right, Jordan Fisher, thanks for your work, my friend. We appreciate it.